of the hour, Tom Vilsack. So it's great to have you back here. Thank you.
It's nice to be back.
Two-term governor of Iowa, President Obama's Secretary of Agriculture. So those 8 years happened, huh?
Yeah.
Whew. How was that?
Pretty quick.
Yeah.
Pretty quick. Hard to believe it's almost over.
Yeah. So you just kind of kicking it around the Department of Ag now and whatevs?
It's a difficult period, frankly. We've been a very active ag department, and as you finish an administration, you have to finish some of the work that is capable of getting done. I've got just tremendous people that are working on that, and it's not, you can't start anything new. And
Right.
It's a little frustrating because there's a lot you'd like to be able to do, but you just don't have time.
Now, have you been advising Hillary Clinton on her ag policy? I mean, what's your role as she works on transitioning into the...
I have to be really careful about answering
political questions. I understand.
No, just because this is an
But you go way back.
Well,
I mean...
we're
just between us.
Yeah. Will you share the cell with me when they put me in for violating the Hatch Act for talking about politics?
I don't know nothing about no Hatch Act. Just talk to me.
Seriously. I can't talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean,
but okay. Well, let's move on to another question then. So, was it thrilling to be like one of the top two? Were you like, I hope I get it, I hope I don't? Were you relieved you didn't get the vice presidential?
Well, I've actually gone through this twice. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride kind of thing. Look, it's an honor to be thought of in that way, obviously, and I think to me, it's more of a reflection of the great work of the people that work with me and around me, both when I was governor with John Kerry and now as secretary with Secretary Clinton. It's a very invasive process. You put 27 banker box full of information, every speech you've given, every tax returns. I had to put my tax returns out. Medical records, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And everything that your spouse has done. Christy used to write articles for our small town newspaper. That had to be supplied and reviewed. And then you go through a series of interviews with lawyers, and then eventually you have an interview with the candidate.
Mm-hmm. And but after you go through all that, you're like, oh, I didn't get it. But then again, look what you would have to be doing.
Well, listen, Tim's a great guy. And
yeah.
I'm thrilled for him and for Ann, his spouse. They're a great partnership, and I'm sure he's going to do.
And you tried running for president once yourself.
That question was about as long as the campaign lasted.
All right. More than I've done. And let's just, because I know you wanted to announce a little bit of funding, and I think it's like $104 million from the USDA. Tell me a little bit about, you're telling us for the first time here, where some of that money's going to go?
Well, part of our program is to promote farmers markets and also to establish the infrastructure for local and regional food systems. So we're announcing over 100 projects are going to receive $26 million that will help market and expand farmers markets throughout the United States and help to sort of build the food hubs and the infrastructure, the aggregators of locally produced food. So that's part of the announcement today. We're also announcing $21.4 million as part of our organic research initiative. There is a great deal of opportunity in the organic high-value space, but we don't know as much about that as we need to.
What do we need to find out? What's the research?
Well, I think that there are a wide variety of ways to improve the production, to increase productivity, to figure out better qualities, longer lasting storage. I mean, there's a whole series of things that could potentially be part of the research that we're going to be funding through that research project. There are 26 grants projects that are going to get assistance in that program. We also, part of that is the organic transition program. What we're really trying to establish, and this has been difficult. In order to transition from a conventional operation to an organic operation, you basically have to be out of business for all intents and purposes for 3 years. And that's incredibly difficult, obviously, for most people to do. So we're trying to figure out, is there a way that you could create added value every year during that transition so that you would be able to label or a label to provide someone the knowledge that, hey, this wasn't conventionally grown, it was grown in the first year of a transition to organic, second year, and each year incrementally it increases in value. There are some regulatory hurdles to that and some legislative hurdles to that, but it seems to me that if we want to see further expansion of this industry where we're seeing a pretty significant demand, we're going to have to figure this out. So part of the money that we've got is going to look at that. $8.6 million is going to go to our community program, which is designed to make it easier for folks in low income neighborhoods to be able to access more nutritious choices. And then we're announcing the availability money that will be awarded in the next year, in 2017, of over $48 million under our specialty crop program, our research program, which is also designed to send a message that we want to broaden and diversify agriculture in this country. We want more diversity in operators, we want to see more women, more people of color, veterans coming in back from their military service. We want to see diversity of size of operations, big, small, and medium-sized, and we want to see diversity of crops being produced in the country.
And we call them specialty crops. We're just talking about fruits and vegetables, right?
Pretty
but
much.
This is like the mindset of the USDA that, oh, those specialty crops, like the fruits, you know, it's a kind of a...
Well, they're herbs. I mean, there's a whole series.
There's herbs.
Yeah, there's a whole series of things that are important,
yeah.
and to separate them from commodity
right.
crops.
And that shift, I mean, part of your tenure, and I think you've been both criticized and praised for this, is your sort of ability to walk the line between what we might call big ag versus shorthand industrial farming. And, you know, over your tenure, we've seen the rising of organics, certainly local fruits and vegetables. The number of farmers markets under your tenure has just exploded in 8 years. So you've really, I think, been a friend to specialty fruit and vegetable growers and try to nurture small markets, but also a friend to big ag. I mean, you're, you know, certainly a believer in biotech, and I think the GMO thing is, I think, certainly it's, you know, nothing that you're unfamiliar with no. or non-supportive of. So you've kind of walked the line on that. And we were talking a little about the division in this country between those two. Have you seen your job as trying to bring those sides together some?
Absolutely, absolutely. For a multitude of reasons. First of all, the reality is that we are going to see an increasing global population, and we're going to have to try to figure out how to grow more food in a much more difficult climate. We're going to see more intense storms. We're going to see places of extended droughts. We're going to see pests and diseases that are very difficult to deal with. We want to sort of reduce our reliance on chemicals and pesticides. To be able to do that, you have to use science and you have to embrace science. So, and when you do, oftentimes there's cost associated with that. That makes it more likely that you're going to see larger scale commercial operations that can spread that cost over a broader base. At the same time, we want to repopulate rural areas. We want to support the rural communities, and that requires people. And not everybody is going to be blessed to be able to inherit a 1,000-acre farm or 500-acre farm. A lot of folks want to move back to the areas that they came from, and so we're trying to create opportunities for small and mid-sized operators. But to do that, it's pretty difficult from a financial standpoint to make it pencil in, unless you have a high-value crop like an organic, or unless you're creating additional job opportunities that can support with a second income, which many, many farm families today need. So you are bringing manufacturing back, and you want that manufacturing to play into the natural resource base of rural areas, so you want it to be plant-based, not fossil fuel-based. Mm-hmm. And I think, given climate change and the concerns we have about emissions and so forth, that a plant-based system provides great opportunities for new manufacturing. So you combine all of that, and now for the first time in a long, long time, we have a companion economy that doesn't conflict with production agriculture, doesn't have to tear that down, it just offers an alternative. And I think you get the best of all worlds if you seek coexistence. And then the last thing I say to folks is, look, right now, less than 1% of America's population farms. The rest, 99% of us, have been incredibly lucky. Every single person in this audience who is not a farmer is able to be not a farmer because you've delegated the responsibility of feeding yourself to farmers and grocery stores. And we have an incredible freedom in this country because we have a functioning agricultural economy. If you look at the hot spots in the world today, what you're going to find is they don't have a functioning agricultural economy and they have a lot of hungry people. If you have unemployed, hungry people, you're going to have very unhappy people. And so part of building a more secure world is also helping those countries create an agricultural economy. And part of it is to recognize and appreciate what we have, not to tear it down, and particularly now in this local and regional food system movement, we've set the foundation now. We've been able to get through to production agriculture that this isn't a threat. It's not designed to replace production agriculture. It's designed to complement.
Do you think that's the perception, you know, of production agriculture and of Monsantos of the world, that those guys, where's the Monsantos of the world?
Rob's right there. What do you think, Rob?
Those guys are after us, and certainly on this side, they're like, you guys just want ethanol, you want monocropping, you want to take the thing, you know, so those sides seem so distant. How do we bring it together?
Well, they're being brought together more effectively in the last 5 or 6 years than before. When we started this effort at USDA, the Know Your Farmer effort, at the beginning of the administration, there was a lot of pushback from production agriculture. There was a lot of pushback from senators that represented.
This was in 2009. It was an initiative called Know Your Farmer,
Know Your Food.
Know Your Food, and Kathleen Merrigan was a big, kind of led that, right?
Right. She basically ran the program, and I named it. She ran it, and she did a terrific job setting it up. And she understood something very basic, which was that you couldn't have a separate program, you couldn't have a separate line item of funding, because if you did, it would be very easy for members of Congress to eliminate that line item and eliminate your capacity to build the foundation. So we essentially took a little bit from this program and a little bit from this program, a little bit from this program, and we put this Know Your Farmer thing together. And then everyone else helped out by using those resources to expand farmers markets, almost 100% increase in the farmers markets. To develop food hubs, almost 100% increase in the number of food hubs. It encouraged us over a period of now 7+ years of making 40,000 separate investments in that system, nearly $1 billion. And now the good news is it was so successful that the senators and congressmen and men and women put it into the Farm Bill. And now it's being funded through Farm Bill. It's a huge thing. Yeah. Now you have a base. Now you're part of the Farm Bill. Now you can build your part of the Farm Bill. And in doing so, you can strengthen the base, you can expand the base, you can encourage more organic. And we also tied it into the trade discussion by saying, hey, there's such a demand for this product that we are not today capable of producing enough of it, so we're going to have to buy, we're going to have to exchange. So we have equivalency agreements with Europe, with Canada, with Japan, so that it's easier for their stuff to get into our country and easier for our stuff to get into their country. So we're creating opportunity. We just have to be patient. And I think if we understand that this is building, that's expanding, it's growing, there's tremendous interest, we're bringing new people into farming, which is also incredibly important, there are more and more benefits. And now the Farm Bureau, I mean, there's a good example.
That's a huge, cultural shift there.
Now the Farm Bill says, absolutely, this is an important consideration for us. We have to put it into our program and our policy making, and these new farmers are going to be Farm Bureau members. They're going to be National Farmers Union members. They're going to be starting their own associations.
Because I think you talk to most to smaller farmers, and there's many here, like the idea that the Farm Bureau is any kind of help to them, it's almost like an enemy to them at this point.
Well, what you don't want is you don't want an organization like the Farm Bureau going to senators and representatives and saying, you know that line item for $100 million of organic research that you put in the Farm Bill, take that out, give it to us.
So you want to make friends with the Farm Bureau so they'll go, give the kids their $100 million, whatever.
Well, and maybe next year it's more than $100 million. And as the number of producers, which is now over 21,000, we've seen a 300% increase in the number of certified organic producers in the last 15 years. As that number increases, there's going to be more and more interest politically in supporting organic, more and more interest in local and regional food systems.
Let me just veer for a minute. Do you think the USDA should be in the business of helping to feed poor people? Do you think SNAP, WIC, those feeding programs should be under the USDA, or should those be broken off, as has been suggested?
The biggest mistake that the production ag folks will make is to try to separate the nutrition assistance programs from the farm programs. Because the farmers represent less than 1% of the population. They live mostly in rural areas, although we're now beginning to see some urban farming, but they live mostly in rural areas, and the number of representatives who have exclusively rural districts, very, very limited. So if you want to get the political support for farm programs, whether it's crop insurance or whether it's the disaster programs or whatever, you're going to have support from urban and suburban legislators. The question is, why would I vote for this? There's nobody in my district, so to speak, that's a farmer, or there are very few people. But there are a lot of SNAP recipients in my district.
Right.
So you have to have that nutrition component. And I say to our farm friends, I say, look, guys, you know, if somebody can buy more at the grocery store, guess what? They actually buy more at the grocery store. Yeah. You know, 97% of the SNAP benefits are redeemed within the first 30 days.
Have you ever tried to fill out a SNAP form to application and see how, I mean, I've got friends who've done it as they need to, and they maybe get like $11 a month, and it's a bunch of paperwork, and it's so challenging to even, and they say it is not worth me getting my $11, but like, why is it so hard for us to feed people in need? I mean, why is this program so, and it keeps getting cut. I know we don't like helping the poor people, all right, I got that, but you know,
I don't know.
I mean, it's really gotten ridiculous in the field. Like, I'm just wondering, when's the last time you actually looked at that application?
Well, we have looked at ways in which we can streamline that process, particularly for senior citizens. 85%, roughly 83 to 85% of eligible people who are eligible for SNAP are participating in the program. When I took over as secretary, that number was around 72%. So we've seen an increase in eligibles participating. The one area where we have slipped up is on the senior citizens, the elderly. There it is a hassle. There it is a problem because they have to renew every year. And the reality is a senior citizen's income is probably not going to change much from that small Social Security check they're getting. So we are looking for creative ways to make it a little easier for senior citizens. You do have to be careful that you don't create a circumstance where those who oppose these programs can use that and suggest that there is rampant fraud, waste, and abuse. You've heard that before. Actually, the fraud rate in SNAP is like less than 1.5%. The error rate's about 3.5%, so total it's 5%. That's pretty good compared to a lot of other programs, and for a long period of time, it was better than the crop insurance fraud error rate. So you know, we just basically say, hey, before we get too critical of these programs, let's make sure you know what the fraud and error rate is in other programs. So it's relatively low, but we don't want to give people the ability to use that as an excuse for further reductions or for making it harder. There's a challenge now with states because you know, roughly 20% of SNAP beneficiaries are what are called able-bodied adults without dependents. And the theory is that those people are having a hard time finding work, and so therefore they need assistance. States are able to waive the requirement that exists in the law today that you get SNAP benefits for 3 months out of every 36 months unless you qualify for an exemption, if you got a child or you've got a disability or something of that nature. If you're able-bodied without dependents, you get 3 months of benefits every 36 months unless your state waives that provision. During the recession, every state waived it. Now, as we've seen unemployment come down by half, states, and particularly Republican states, who are led by Republican governors, are actually reducing and eliminating those waivers. So our comeback to that is to say, okay, fine, I understand why you're doing this, but you need to do a better job, state, of using the money that we're giving you for employment and training. It's not enough just to simply say, okay, buddy, you're on your own, go get a job. You've got to train that person may be living in a rural community and has no car. And there's no job in small town wherever they live, but the job is 15 miles down the road. How does he get to work? Or it may be a situation where a returning veteran dealing with some post-traumatic stress, it may be difficult for them to readjust. So we have convinced the Congress to give us resources to establish 10 pilot projects in 10 states and a Center of Excellence in the state of Washington to try to figure out how we can do a better job of using the employment and training money to get those folks trained, reduce the barriers, to get them to work, so that instead of just kicking somebody off, you're basically giving them a road to opportunity.
So are you going to continue, if say Hillary Clinton became the president and asked you to continue as Secretary of Agriculture, would you?
It is the greatest job I've ever had, but I honestly believe that there needs to be turnover. You know, sometimes the bureaucracy can become calcified because you have a certain way that you lead, a certain way that you think, and they sort of match themselves to that. I think change is good. I think somebody can come in with different ideas and different thoughts, so long as the foundation, particularly in this space, is well laid. And then it's up to the folks in rooms like this to make sure that future secretaries understand the importance of diversity in agriculture.
So no, you wouldn't.
Probably not.
Probably not. Now, if you were, you know how it's customary for the previous president to write a letter to the new president and leave it on their desk. If you were leaving that letter on the desk of the new Secretary of Agriculture, what would you say?
Well, you don't have enough time for me to answer that question. In fact, I've started writing that letter. I think it's already 10 pages long.
A quick synopsis for us here, then.
Let me contrast it to the information I got from the previous secretary. And not meaning any disrespect to Ed Schaefer, he's a great guy. But I remember sitting next to him, and the only thing he said to me was, "You've got an Air Force."
That seems ominous.
That's kind of what I thought to myself. I said, or am I going to invade Mexico? Why do I need an Air Force? He was talking about the Forest Service. We have lots of planes, and lots of people jump out of planes to fight fires. That was his transition memo to me. I think mine's going to be a little bit more detailed.
Okay.
It's going to break down every mission area and identify the problem areas that, like this morning on the train on the way up here, I wrote the one on food safety. And
are you for that or against it?
Well, I'm for it.
Okay.
And we've actually improved food safety. We think we've reduced foodborne illness by 12% in this administration.
That's a big number.
It's a big number. However, it's one of those things that you don't think about when you become the Secretary of Agriculture. You don't think you're going to have to deal with food safety other than, you got a little section of your department. But that can cause you a tremendous amount of time and crisis management once there's a foodborne illness outbreak. Because in order to establish and to stop distribution of the tainted food, you have to trace it back to the original cause of the foodborne illness. That's a lot harder than people realize. People expect you to be able to do that immediately. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months to figure it out. And meanwhile, the media is going, hey, why aren't you recalling this? Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you? Well, legally we can't legally we can't be more.
And people realize that legally you can't recall a tainted food in this country. It's all voluntary.
You can put a lot of pressure, but the problem is you don't know who to ask to recall, right?
Right.
Somebody say, well, we know it's XYZ company. Well, you may
it's that Chinese restaurant I ate at last night.
You may very well be right about that, but until we can prove
scientifically,
it's hard for me to pick up the phone and call the CEO of XYZ and say, hey, man, you got to.
But you've done it the peanut butter thing in
Well,
Georgia.
we've done it.
You've been able to do that.
We've done it, but I learned lots of lessons along the way, which I hope my successor doesn't have to learn. So that's an example of something that I would provide. On the SNAP issue, I wrote that one today too. I said, look, pay attention to the integrity of the program, because that is a place where people can attack it. Make sure that states use the employment and training money. This is just unbelievable. We provided more money in the Farm Bill for states, or not the Farm Bill, the Nutrition Bill, when we changed the nutrition meal standards for kids. We provided states with $90 million to help them acclimate and to put that program in play. Very few states used all that money. Yet I was getting letters from governors going, oh my gosh, this is so hard to implement. I'm going, use the money, use the money to incent people, use the money to train people. So I want my successor to know, hey, a lot of these programs are administered by states, and they have responsibility here, and make sure that you hold them accountable, because I guarantee you they're going to hold you accountable.
Right, right. I know people have questions, and again, we got maybe 5-6 minutes, so preferably no speeches, but good direct questions. Yes, go ahead here.
We hire about 100 people to work on our farm for about 6 months of the year. We are consistently 20 people short. This leads to fields of unharvested, rotting crops. This is not only waste of micronutrient-dense specialty vegetables, but a waste of resources to grow that crop. Can you tell us what, if anything, is happening in the Department of Agriculture to address the broken guest worker program? Quite frankly, domestic workers do not want to do field work.
Thank you.
The answer to your question, long-term, is not the guest worker program. It's comprehensive immigration reform, which would incorporate a new system that would provide stability in your workforce and create the ability of people to be here and enter here more easily, and provide you with much less paperwork that you have to fill out. I understand the H-2A system is broken. It needs to be totally scrapped, and it needs to be incorporated into a comprehensive immigration reform. Even if we fix the H-2A system, you would still have problems. or if it wasn't you having a problem, it would be somebody down the road having a problem. We simply don't have enough agricultural workers without comprehensive immigration reform. And your experience of crops not being harvested is amplified by those who have made the decision not to grow the crops to begin with. That gets back to the whole issue of how are we going to feed a growing world population if we're wasting a third of the food that we have in this country, which is a shame, and we're not growing everything that we're capable of growing, and we're not harvesting everything we do plant. It is long, long overdue that Congress have the guts and the political will to get this done and to basically push back on this notion that somehow we're costing people their jobs. We would be able to create jobs with comprehensive immigration reform. We would be able to create a pathway to citizenship for these folks so that they could be incorporated in our country and they could pay a fair share of taxes and they'd have adequate protections. It's got to be done, and hopefully the next administration has the guts and courage to do it.
Great, thank you. We got one over here. Thanks, good question.
What would your letter say about ethanol going forward?
Ooh, everybody's like, ethanol.
Well, full disclosure, you know, I'm a fan of it, and here's why. Because I know for a fact that it has stabilized prices and avoided the farm crisis of the 80s that I saw and I dealt with when I was a small town lawyer representing farmers who were being foreclosed on. It was a very, very difficult time, particularly in the Midwest. I don't want that to happen again. Secondly, I know that it also reduces the cost of gasoline. Depending upon how much gas costs at any point in time, it could be anywhere from 25 cents to $1 a gallon savings to the consumer. Third, it employs 400,000 folks, which obviously is incredibly important in terms of rural employment opportunities. Four, it's better for the environment in terms of air emissions. It's the equivalent of taking millions of cars off the road as we deal with greenhouse gas emissions. And five, it reduces our reliance on foreign oil and helps our balance of trade. Now, having said that, it is important for us to modernize and to get into the next second and third generations of biofuels, to be able to move away from our over-reliance on just the kernel of corn and using other ways of producing that biofuel, whether it's municipal waste, whether it's agricultural waste, whether it's algae, whether it's switchgrass, whether it's woody biomass. And I think it's also important for us to move beyond just cars and trucks. I think there's an incredible opportunity for us in the aviation and marine fuel system to help our Defense Department keep our sailors, our airmen and women safer by not having to import oil from the Middle East for the Pacific theater, but growing it domestically here in the U.S. I was on a destroyer not long ago that was being refueled from fuel that was made from beef tallow, creating opportunities in the U.S., not someplace else. And the commercial aviation industry is very interested in this in order to be able to meet the emission requirements internationally. Alaska Airlines committed to full-blown biofuels by 2020. This year, the equivalent of 12,500 air flights from LAX will be basically biofuel mix. So there's a tremendous opportunity here. And I think we need to update the research because a lot of the concerns about ethanol are based on research first-generation ethanol. A lot of changes, a lot of efficiencies, a lot of ways in which we produce it with much less energy are now being developed and utilized in the field. And I think right now we're at a situation where the energy production capacity of ethanol exceeds that of oil.
Great.
So lots of opportunities there. That's what I would say.
Ethanol, check. Okay. Go.
You mentioned that you were some funding for farmers markets.
Yes.
I was just curious. There's been stories written about some of the, let's call it, misrepresentation of some of the vendors that participate in them. Does any of this funding go towards helping the organizers of the markets better vet some of the?
So you're talking about farmers markets where people are just buying boxes of commodity oranges and showing up at the farmers market and
saying they're from somewhere.
So some help from market managers to actually vet who's showing up.
I was just curious what the funding was for.
Well, the funding is primarily for the hard infrastructure of setting up a farmer's market or maybe potentially creating an indoor market. It's for promotion, being able to advertise. It's for the initial setup. It's for the ability to lease areas to create farmers markets. In some cases, it can also be to make it, to develop double buck programs where people who come in with a SNAP card are able to redeem for every buck they spend, they get another buck of purchasing from an outside source. So it's a way of promoting and expanding the utilization of farmers markets. I think we leave it up to the individual market because of the importance of maintaining their reputation to make sure that they are fully aware of where their product is coming
I think
from.
we have time for one more question. How about you? Hang on, he's going to bring you a microphone. Just 1 second.
Another thing you mentioned about funding was food hubs. I was just wondering if you could talk to that. What is a food hub, and are there more of them? And
Sure.
maybe, yeah.
Well, we have over 300 food hubs in America today. And these are aggregators. These are folks who work with a series of local producers, small-time farmers who essentially by themselves would not necessarily be able to market effectively, but if they could aggregate what they're growing with other similarly situated growers, they would get enough quantity to be able to go to a local school, for example, and say, we will be able to provide you X, whatever it is, pork chops or whatever, in sufficient quantity to be part of your school meal program. We have a farm-to-school grant program where we're encouraging local schools to really think about where their product comes from. Instead of having it trucked 1,000 miles in a frozen box, why not buy it from a local producer? The ability to have it aggregated and then processed and packaged uniformly, that's what a food hub does. We've seen a doubling of those food hubs, and now we have what are called integrators or coordinators. We have 10 of them in 10 districts around the United States where we're trying to figure out precisely where those 162,000 farmers who are small and mid-sized operators who are locally and regionally connected with their customer through a farmer's market, direct-to-consumer sale, restaurant, the farm-to-school kind of program, and the purchasers of that food, and trying to create the supply chain, a very consistent, stable, secure supply chain so farmers know exactly where they have to go and how they can get rid of their products. The beauty of this system, from my perspective, is that farmers are able to price it themselves. They're able to have more control over what they get for their product. If you're in a commodity market, you're basically got to take whatever the Chicago Board of Trade figures out your product is worth, and that's based on a global market. It rewards size, it rewards efficiency, it rewards huge gains in productivity. For a small, mid-sized operator, you get killed in that system. So you have to, I think, you have to have your own market, your own ability to go to your local school and say, I'll sell you my pork chops, my chicken, my vegetables for X. And you can basically, probably will be charging a little bit more than what the commodity price would be, but the school district is thinking this is a good thing for us to keep the money in the district. It's good for us to build support in the agricultural economy areas so that when we have a bond issue or we need support from the community, local farmers aren't going to be against us, they're going to be for us. So there's a way of building community through these systems. But if you're a producer and you don't know who your customer is, you don't know where your customer is, and you don't know how to get your product to the customer, it's tough. So we think if we can build these systems in place with food hubs and with promoting more purchasing by farmers markets, farm to school, restaurants and so forth, we'll be able to create a supply chain that will support more of these local and regional systems, which will support more small-sized operations, which will repopulate rural communities. And I know we've got time, but this is really important. Here's why this is important to everybody in this room. And I'll finish with this. I say this everywhere I go. I already talked about the fact that farmers basically give us incredible freedom with our lives. And our farm system and our food system in this country, you can criticize it, but the reality is that we still pay a lot less for our food than most people do in the world, which is what allows this economy to be as complex and as multi-layered as it is, which creates employment opportunities, which creates strength, which puts America in a different position in a lot of places. It is also the place where a majority, not a majority, but a substantial percentage of our military comes from. It is a place where kids grow up with the understanding that something of value, that they get something of value, requires them to give something back. They grow up with this. Farmers understand the land, you can't keep taking the land, you just can't keep planting something, you got to replenish it from time to time. You have to give something back to it. They grow up with that value system, and then they think to themselves, this country has given me tremendous opportunities, I need to give it back something. How do I do that? I do it through service, I do it through volunteer work. There's an ethic, there's a value system that I think is really important to the future of this country. And if we depopulate rural areas because we don't create opportunities, or we just potentially have 6 farms because they're massive, we're going to lose that value system. So the local and regional food system, from my perspective, is as much about protecting that value system and enhancing it as it is all the good reasons why the people are in this room today. Because they think it's healthier, they think it tastes better, they think it's, whatever, fill in the blank. I think it's just really, really important for that part of this country to get a little more attention, a little more appreciation than it has, because it gives a lot back to the country, and it gives a lot back to every single one of us.
Secretary Vilsack, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.